With Egypt and Israel, we've been talking about the preparations of Egypt. We've been talking about the tensions between Egypt and Israel, the actions, the progress in the Sinai Peninsula, and the Israeli escalating tone against Egypt. And now we had a very interesting statement from none other than the Israeli defense minister. The Israeli defense minister was speaking at a conference, marking the long peace treaty between Israel and Egypt. And he said a few things. Now, one of the things that he said is, we will not allow Egypt to violate the peace agreement. They constantly state, the Israeli side, that the peace is still there. We still have peace with Egypt. However, we're worried about the expansion. We're worried with the military presence. They raised it with the Egyptians. They got the cold shoulder from Egypt. Our territory, will do whatever we want. But now, Israel Katz, the Israel defense minister, is saying, we won't allow them to violate the peace agreement. What do you mean we won't allow them to violate the peace agreement? Those in Israel who are in real good knowledge and have dealt with the peace treaty and analyzed the peace treaty and analyzed what Egypt is doing in the Sinai Peninsula, say that Egypt breached every line of the peace treaty with the peace agreement with Israel. What does he mean? Well, he doesn't mean a lot. It's just talk. Much of what Israeli leaders do is just talk, showing something. Egypt, at the end of the day, they did breach the ceasefire agreement, the peace agreement with Israel, by having these unprecedented numbers in the Sinai Peninsula. And guess what? They're expanding further. They have tanks at the borders with Israel. Egypt has unprecedented numbers of troops, whether it's military or policing. They've had drills, and they're preparing in Sinai, and they will stay at this high level of readiness and alertness so long as Israel remains in the Philadelphia corridor. That is one of the key things from an Egyptian perspective. So long as Israel is on the Philadelphia corridor, we will be remaining here and we will be on a very high alert. And there's no guarantee that we will withdraw even if Israel retreats. Why? Because Israel did this unilaterally at their own accord. They haven't considered our approach. And we need to understand, after the 7th of October, Egypt, not only that they did not condemn these attacks, and Israel is complaining now that the Arab Summit did not condemn the 7th of October attacks. Egypt, not only they did not condemn them, but they asked Israel not to respond to them. The Egyptian government told Israel, don't respond and don't have a ground invasion. And they threatened them with multiple things. Now, Israel went against all of the Egyptian demands in Gaza because, they wanted to do whatever they want. But Egypt, to them, it's a matter of national security. According to the peace treaty between Israel and Egypt, and according to the understandings post the 2005 unilateral withdrawal of Israel from the Gaza Strip, they said, no, this area has a trilateral way of management. And Egypt, the Palestinian Authority, and Israel, trilateral agreement, what goes in, what goes out, but there is no Israeli presence. We need to have a Palestinian Authority presence. Now, initially, pressure was applied on Hamas after they won the elections, and then Israel started to show resistance to their presence, of course, and they had coup attempts inside of Gaza through some of their agents. Hamas, of course, took it down swiftly after Al-Qassam brigades decided to take very serious measures to take it down. And ever since then, Hamas was in full control of Gaza. And that was the reality. And that was the reality that Egypt also dealt with. Although Egypt and Hamas, the current Egyptian government, Well, they had, and the Egyptian leader, they had tensions with Hamas because Hamas showed clear support previously of the Egyptian elected President Morsi. And then when the coup happened, tensions rose between them and Sisi. And those tensions remained there for several years up until both of them understood that we need each other. We need to coordinate. And the situation started to improve between both parties to a level where the previous senior head of the Egyptian intelligence actually went and visited Gaza. He actually went to visit in Gaza, and he met with the late Yahya Sinwar at the time. And by such a senior Egyptian official visiting Gaza, you're also signaling a level of cooperation and a level of coordination and even to an extent trust between both of them. So Egypt is very worried about this presence, and they're also very worried about the statements coming from Israel that we're not going to withdraw. You see, Benjamin Netanyahu saw what happened. He saw how his image was tarnished after he withdrew from the Netzarim line. The Netzarim line was Israel's like golden trophy inside of Gaza. They used to constantly boast about the Netzarim corridor, the fact that they're occupying it, and they said we're not going to withdraw from it. And then they started to have what's called as the General's Plan, basically killing every living thing in the north of Gaza, and eventually forcing all of them to the south of the Netzarim corridor that Israel would ultimately control up until they ethnically cleanse the population from the north, and then they establish a new temporary reality up until they deal with the residents of the south. However, Israel withdrew from the Netzarim corridor. And despite the fact that Benjamin Netanyahu tried to delay this withdrawal, he eventually withdrew. He withdrew and he was humiliated. It was a clear sign of victory for the Palestinians. The Palestinians were going back. Over 500,000 went back to the north despite all of the destruction, despite not having any sort of life aspect or lifeline almost in the north. Everything is destroyed. They started rebuilding, water wells and slowly started to have electricity. But Hamas, even in this temporary ceasefire, they started to push more for even having, internet in the north, all of the things that they need. But that was very problematic. Why? Benjamin Netanyahu and his image. There were reports of minor withdrawals from the Philadelphia corridor, and the agreement said that Israel has to have a gradual withdrawal. That also didn't happen. And by day 52, you should completely evacuate from the Philadelphia corridor. And both the Palestinian side and the Egyptian side were pressing on that. They need to do that. There is no arguing. But Benjamin Netanyahu did not withdraw. And now he's trying to stretch it again under the excuse of the south being the Philadelphia corridor, being the southern border of the axis of evil, as he called it, with his famous speech with the map, and saying that this is the lifeline, this is the oxygen tank of Hamas. Other Israeli leaders saying that, Egypt was complicit on the 7th of October anyway. But he's trying his luck. And one of the most important things that he said, by the way, is the fact that it's the southern border of the axis of evil, in reference to, Iran and the resistance fronts. Now, why did he say that? And is there a reality to it? Is there something genuine or substantial behind Benjamin Netanyahu's claims that this southern border is the axis of evil border with Gaza? Well, from an Israeli perspective, they do not trust the information that the Egyptian government is giving them about the Philadelphia corridor, about them taking down the tunnels, about all of that. There is a solid Israeli belief that, no, there are still tunnels and they are still operating and getting to Gaza. Now, a question arises. Well, you have been present on the Philadelphia corridor for almost a year, like you were present in the Gaza Strip for many months, if we want to take, each territory at a time. Have you found the tunnels? Did you dismantle the tunnels? You've been in the Philadelphia corridor for so long. Have you exposed something to prove your claim that there are tunnels? It's one of the two. Either there are no tunnels, or there are tunnels, but they're very well kept and hidden and operational in a very secretive manner, and no Israeli presence or lack thereof can prevent that lifeline for the Palestinian resistance. Because we need to remember, Israel carried out many strikes on the Philadelphia corridor without any success. No success. Like they said there, we dismantled a third and once 2/3 of the network of tunnels and only for the Palestinian resistance to pop up from underneath them. And you'll have one fighter starting to target multiple terror tanks inside of Gaza. The next point here is the fact that Israel is mentioning this as, well, the southern border of the axis of evil. Is there something between Egypt and Iran? Iran and Egypt have been increasingly coordinating together after the genocide began in Gaza, like they have been coordinating with the Turks, and like Egypt has been coordinating with the Turks and having a strategic cooperation council. Their cooperation with Iran wasn't as, or declared as, thorough as their relationship with Turkey. However, there are many reasons to believe that this coordination exists apart from the blatant, clear coordination, such as the president's meeting, certain coordinations on the ground and visits. Both of them recently joined the BRICS, well, in the beginning of 2024. From an Iranian perspective, it's very important. And in case there's any escalation between Egypt and Israel, Iran would be very interested in supporting Egypt. Iran has had an approach towards Israel of having these fronts against Israel in what is oftenly labeled sometimes as a ring of fire. We will support everyone who is against Israel, from Lebanon, from Syria, West Bank, Gaza. But, the Iranians always had a problem, or the Iranian government had problems with the Egyptian government, especially with the collapse of the previous Shah and the fact that the Shah found refuge in Egypt under Sadat at the time. And this caused tensions between the two countries. However, gradually things started to change. There are geopolitical changes, and Iran would be very interested in supporting Egypt. It doesn't outright mean that they will immediately go in, but Iran knows that Egypt, well, they told the Americans and the Israelis, we will not be helping intercept anything coming from Iran, although they were capable. And also, Egypt did not intercept anything that came from Yemen against Israel, despite the fact that they have their own tensions with the Houthis, with Ansarullah, because their blockade, although was targeting Israel and anyone trying to send anything to Israel, it did have an impact on the Suez Canal. And this means that Egypt does have, to a large extent, a strategic view to the conflict with Israel, and Iran is very much interested in nurturing that based on their mutual benefits, both Iranian and Egyptian, in case there is a further escalation between Israel and Egypt.